These are 5 wide receivers I'm just not that interested in drafting in 2025 fantasy football leagues. Let's get right to the list. We're starting with the Detroit Lions, going Jameson Williams. Now, I did think about including Amon-Ra St. Brown on here as well. I think if I have concerns about Jameson Williams, I should probably have concerns about St. Brown. Ultimately, I decided against it. I don't love St. Brown in the first round. I don't think I'll have a ton of him this year either, but I respect the talent. I respect his role in the offense. I don't know that he's going to return top 10 overall value, but I don't think he's going to be a total bust in the way that Jameson Williams could if things don't break his way this season. With Williams and with the Lions overall, obviously what we worry about here is the departure of Ben Johnson. But to me, I think that could hurt Jameson Williams more than it does someone like St. Brown. Specifically the way Ben Johnson was able to scheme up big play opportunities for Jameson Williams over and over. When you think of Jameson Williams, you don't think about volume. You don't think about, catches over the middle for 8 yards, doing that 7 or 8 times per game. You don't think about red zone targets either. He had fewer of those last season than Demarcus Robinson. He had fewer red zone targets than Deontay Johnson last season. I don't even know which team Deontay Johnson finished the season on. You think about the big plays when it comes to Williams. The go routes, the reverses, the creative ways in which Ben Johnson was able to get him involved. Maybe I'm putting too much stock into Ben Johnson. That's very possible. We'll see how it goes in Chicago. But if there's a pass catcher for the Lions who I think could drop off this season, my money is on that guy being Jameson Williams. He finished as the wide receiver 22 a year ago. That was with 2 missed games, although I don't know that with his frame and with his history that we can necessarily just pencil in a 16 or 17 game season for Jameson Williams. Looking at this year's ADP, he's going around the same range that he finished last year in most formats. I don't think the price is outrageous. If you're willing to lean into the risk, if you think the Lions are going to be just as productive offensively as they were last season, I totally get it. But I'd rather have DK Metcalf. I'd rather have Xavier Worthy, Devontae Smith. You have a little bit of a boring, safer option. I get it. But I think the Lions will be a very good offense. I worry about the creativity void created by the absence of Ben Johnson. Jameson Williams had 5 catches of at least 50 yards last season. 11 of his 14 career touchdowns, this is including playoffs, have come from at least 30 yards out. 9 of those came from at least 40 yards out. I just wonder how replicable that's going to be year over year in the absence of Ben Johnson. Before we get to the rest of our list, please take a moment to give this video a like if you're enjoying our content here at RotoWire. Make sure you're subscribed, of course, to the channel as well. And go check out RotoWire.com. Put in that promo code. You see it right there on your screen, YouTube15. That's going to give you an instant 15% off any of our products over at RotoWire. You'll get access to everything we offer on the site. Projections, all of our rankings, dynasty content, the RotoWire picks and props app. So much you could take advantage of over at RotoWire. Just use that code, YouTube15. All right, next up on the list, we're going to the Baltimore Ravens, Zay Flowers. And this one is more about price and opportunity cost than anything else. Zay Flowers goes around that same range as Jameson Williams, wide receiver 27 right now at the NFFC. Williams, the wide receiver 25. With Williams, there's the obvious catalyst. Ben Johnson is no longer the OC. With Flowers, the situation in Baltimore is a lot more consistent. You have the same head coach, the same OC, all the returning talent on that offense. Flowers did finish as the wide receiver 25 a year ago, but that was a season that was marred by plenty of ups and downs. He had 5 games with less than 6 PPR points in what I would call only 4 true splash games, despite operating in an elite offense with a career year from Lamar Jackson. On balance, Zay Flowers finished as the wide receiver 30 or lower in PPR leagues in 11 of 17 games. That's just way too many for the top target in a good offense. He also played in all 17 regular season games. Of course, got hurt midway through Week 18 against Cleveland, missed time in the playoffs. But on a per-game basis, Zay Flowers was the wide receiver 36 during the regular season. Now, he did lead the Ravens in targets. His team target share was among the best in the NFL. Those are things we like. But it resulted in only 4 touchdowns in a season in which Lamar Jackson threw a career-high, by far, 41 touchdown passes. And the reason that Zay Flowers only ended up with 4 touchdowns a year ago, he's just not really a part of the plan when Baltimore finds itself in the red zone. He was targeted only 7 times in the red zone all of last season. Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, even Rashad Bateman all saw more action in the red zone than Zay Flowers did. And obviously, when you have Lamar Jackson and you have Derrick Henry in place, the Ravens have 2 excellent options to just keep the ball on the ground in all those scoring situations. To me, Zay Flowers remains a really solid option in what should, again, be one of the best offenses in the NFL. But I don't know if we can expect Lamar Jackson to again throw 41 touchdowns. I think there's going to be some regression there. Keep in mind, he threw just 24 touchdowns in 16 games back in 2023. And look, even if that does sustain and Lamar is pushing for another 40 touchdown season, Flowers' lack of involvement in the red zone remains a glaring issue. And again, I don't know that we can count on that many passing touchdown opportunities. So to me, Flowers is a decent floor pick, but with the Ravens investing in Rashad Bateman this offseason, they're keeping Mark Andrews, they still have Isaiah Likely. I think this is going to be, once again, a relatively egalitarian passing game. So at current cost, I find myself out on Zay Flowers. The next player on our list, Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commanders. Absolutely love Terry McLaurin, the player. He's coming off of the best fantasy season of his career, had some really memorable plays in what felt like just kind of a magical year for the Commanders from start to finish. Ended up as the wide receiver 7 on the year in PPR, by far his best fantasy finish in his career. Played all 17 games, finished second in the NFL in touchdowns with 13 behind only Jamar Chase. Now, we're not being asked to draft Terry McLaurin at that price this season, which is very nice. He's currently the wide receiver 17 at the NFFC in the month of June, going end of round 3 on average. Some experts, though, have him as high as wide receiver 10, wide receiver 11. That is way too rich for my blood. I have some real concerns about Terry McLaurin sustaining that level of touchdown production in particular. Even with the burgeoning star at quarterback in Jaden Daniels, McLaurin scored on nearly 16% of his catches last season. That is an outrageous rate. He finished 19th in the NFL in total receptions and ranked outside the top 20 in total targets. Only had 7 games with 8 or more targets all of last season. His efficiency on those targets was remarkable, right? But that's the kind of thing that could be very difficult to replicate year over year. The Commanders did bring in Deebo Samuel this offseason. We'll see how much he has left in the tank at this point. I'm not super high on Deebo Samuel. De'Ami Brown, yeah, he moved on to Jacksonville. But even at this point in his career, Deebo Samuel represents more target competition for McLaurin than anyone on last year's Commanders roster. So we at least have to take that acquisition seriously. Look, there is a world in which Jaden Daniels and the Commanders pick up where they left off last season. They're one of the best offenses in the NFL. And yeah, in that case, maybe McLaurin is appropriately valued, but I just don't think there's a lot of upside here compared to where he's being drafted, especially relative to last season. I'm bracing for some serious regression in terms of touchdowns, and I think at current cost, I'm not going to have a whole lot of Terry McLaurin. All right, I want to hit a couple more names here, and we're going to go down to Tampa Bay. Look, I'm ashamed that I put this player on the list, but I got to make the case for Mike Evans. I know. Who doesn't love Mike Evans? 11 straight seasons of at least 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns last year, 24 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons combined. And look, you're even getting a slight discount compared to last year's finish. The cost is not outrageous by any means, but look, at some point, father time is going to come for Mike Evans. He turns 32 in August. He's avoided the big injuries throughout his career, but he is still a guy who tends to get nicked up. He, of course, missed 3 games midway through last season. Liam Cohen is no longer in Tampa Bay. He's in Jacksonville. The Bucs get Chris Godwin back from injury. They added Emeka Egbuka in round 1 out of Ohio State. You got to look at what Mike Evans did with Chris Godwin in the lineup. They both actually got hurt in that Ravens game midway through the year. I believe it was week 7. Before the Chris Godwin injury, Mike Evans was averaging about 4 catches for 48 yards per week. Post Chris Godwin injury, 7 catches for 96 yards per week for Mike Evans. That's a big jump. And all indications are that Chris Godwin will be back healthy to begin the season. Even if he gets off to a slow start, at some point, he's going to be back to the guy that we saw last season. Again, you got Egbuka in the mix. You got Jalen McMillan in the mix. I know Tampa Bay and Mike Evans want to keep this streak alive, but there's a lot of talent in that wide receiver room. I ran the numbers over on StatHead. Since 2000, only 12 players have produced 1,000 yards in their 12th NFL season, including my guy Jimmy Smith, by the way, who did it at age 36 as a member of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So there is precedent here. It's not impossible. I know players take care of their bodies better than ever, but I'm just saying, I'm approaching Mike Evans with some degree of caution this year. At some point, this is going to run out. All right, we'll finish up with one more quick one. Travis Hunter of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I am a Jaguars fan. It pains me to say this, but I just can't pay the price. I can't pay the price. I know the ADP has become a little bit more palatable over the last few weeks, but he's still going off the board way too early for me. He's a top 50 pick in a lot of best ball drafts. I get the upside. He's an unbelievably unique prospect. I loved him at Colorado, but the fact remains there's just too much risk here. The role, the size, the snap share, the presence of Brian Thomas, still lingering questions about whether or not Trevor Lawrence is actually good. the fact that the Jaguars are just a terrible franchise and good things seem to never happen to them, we have to keep that in mind. I'm partially joking about the last one, but I am keeping my expectations very much tempered for Travis Hunter in year one. We've heard kind of mixed reports as far as how much they want to use him on either side of the ball. I think he spends plenty of time at wide receiver, but keep in mind, Brian Thomas is that dude. I mean, he was a top 10 fantasy receiver as a rookie, and that was with Mac Jones throwing him the ball for half of the season. I don't think Brian Thomas is going to slow down. I don't think he's going to cede too many touches, too many targets to Travis Hunter. And ultimately, I worry about Travis Hunter staying healthy. I worry about the adjustment to the NFL. It's a huge jump from the college level. I think he'll be fine as a rookie, but if you're taking him somewhere in the 60s, even the early 70s, there's just too much value on the board for me to take that leap. So believe me, I hope I'm wrong, but I'm okay sitting this one out.